There are many ways to start a painting, each of them perfectly fine. I'm not here to judge. There are no wrong ways if it works. Whatever works for you works for you. You could block in values, lights and darks, you could use simple shapes, you could try and first draw it in slow, painstaking detail. But I think the best way, and the way that helps you be a better artist as a whole, producing more painterly and expressive paintings, is by making mistakes. Yes, that's right, making mistakes. Turns out Bob Ross was right with those happy little accidents. In this video, I'll show you how constantly observing and using your eyes to map out the space on the canvas and roughly making marks until you get the desired effect can help you ultimately draw better, paint better, improve how you see shapes and values, and get you thinking about proportion, shape and positioning, along with losing the fear of just starting the thing. And do stick around until the end for a simple tip to help you gain confidence in your shape making and sizing on the canvas and get you copying the masters like a pro. So come on, let's get to work. Right, so before we get into painting and using an alla prima technique of painting in one go direct to the canvas, I'm going to quickly show you with sketches the principles of what I mean and how we need to train our eye to see space, form and distances better. I'm using Artrage today, but you can use any digital art program for this and also apply it to real-world drawing and painting. Don't think of it as if you're drawing a bird or a human or an object. You are filling space. Look at negative space, distances from the top and the side. Start making lines and guides to help you get that positioning right and a good base to build upon. There's nothing worse than putting a huge amount of work into a study and ultimately finding that something is wrong, too small, over to the right too much. It's just a pain and a chore. Now, a good tip to see the image in more simplistic terms is to squint your eyes and look at the reference image. Think of each element as a simple shape, almost like a block, that we will chip away at like a sculptor, making small mistakes and corrections along the way to reveal the figure, object or bird in this case. And once you hone these observation skills, your paintings and prep drawings will get tighter and tighter and you'll be copying masters like a pro. Right, so we're going to put those drawing skills to the test now with our painting. And as you can see in Artrage here, I am trying to line up my canvas to the reference image, which will help me kind of grid things out in my mind and act as a guide as I look across. So we're painting the Goldfinch here by Karel Fabricius. It's one of my favourite little paintings. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at putting down some base paint first, because there's nothing more daunting than looking at a white canvas. And so when you look quite closely at this painting, you can see there's a bit of an orange undertone, a bit of a base painting. So I'm just going to slap some paint down nice and thick with a kind of semi-dry brush. I don't want it to be too wet and watery, the paint on this. So in my settings on Artrage, I have lowered down the loading on the brush a little bit. So as you can see, as I drag it across, it is a little bit dry going across. I don't want to load paint on there for doing this prep study because it will get a little bit unwieldy on there and all the paint will start mushing up and turning a bit dark and dingy. So I've got my base paint on, and what I want to do is use those skills that we've talked about before, thinking about distance from the side of the canvas and distance from, you know, the elements and how they relate to each other and size. So I'm going to do that rather than just sketching it out. I am going to paint in the background roughly and try and leave the space of where the bird and the little bird box is. Now, this is really loose, really not concentrating too much on it. It's just a guide. I'm just, you know, looking across, constantly using my eyes and seeing where things should kind of lie on the canvas. And as you can see, I'm drawing a line across in my head and I'm just blocking in to leave a void, really. And it's like our sketch at the beginning. Think of it as shapes that you are going to chip away at, and all these little mistakes that we make will refine and get closer to the actual image we're trying to copy, or the face we're trying to paint, or the object, or whatever it may be. So I've chosen a slightly darker color now to try and get a little bit more structure to our shape and our bird here. So I don't know whether you know this painting. A quick history lesson as we're just looking at it. It was painted in 1654, as you can see on the canvas, which is convenient for us. And Karel Fabricius was part of the Dutch Golden Age. He was a fantastic artist. He was a pupil of Rembrandt. And he only has, I think, 15 paintings surviving around that, because sadly he died the year this painting was painted, in 1654, in a gunpowder explosion. I think 100 people died in the explosion, and a lot of his works were destroyed. So it makes this painting even more kind of mysterious and kind of special in a way. And I think I will come back and revisit this painting as a proper master's study, because there's a lot to talk about, what it was, whether it was a trompe-l'oeil, kind of a deception of the eye, whether it hung on a wall, why he kept the painting white in the background. Was it meant to look like a kind of actual bird on the wall? And then you've got the kind of life it's led hundreds of years later with Digital'art's book called The Goldfinch, and then the movie subsequently after it, and what's its meaning. And it's beautifully painted, it's very delicate and loose, but the details there when you can step back from it. So as you can see now, I am making lots of little mistakes. I am using a darker colour again to get those kind of dark tone values in, and I'm just trying to work my way across, and if I make a mistake, I'll come back and correct it. And already I can see now, in looking back, I've kind of gone a little bit too low at the bottom of the box. The bird's looking in a reasonable place. The top of the box is looking reasonable, but I think I've gone a little bit too low. I think I've followed my guide a little bit. And this is a very quick study, so what you do is, once you get to the end and you start noticing these little discrepancies, you can go back and then correct those mistakes further. So I'm just kind of blocking in really simple colours, and what I'll do is I'll speed up the process from here, but I think you're kind of hopefully getting the gist of what I mean, that using very simple brush strokes or pencil strokes, you start correcting as you go, and the more you kind of look at it and squint your eyes and just see the shape, rather than trying to get worried and bogged down in the detail of trying to capture every feather on the bird and getting the angles exactly right, the more mistakes you make, the more honed in you get. And what you'll find is, as you progress as an artist and practice this, and hopefully you'll follow the little tip at the end which will help you progress, you'll start to get quicker at this process, and there'll be less mistakes needed, and you'll be able to just copy something almost direct, hopefully one for one, or just with a little bit of refining needed. So I'll speed it up a little bit, and we'll come back in a second and see how we're getting on. So as you see, I'm not colour picking from the painting, I'm just trying to get general tones that are kind of close to it. We can refine them as we go. So I'm just kind of quickly choosing colours. I know the blue's not exactly perfect, the yellow of the bar's not perfect yet, but we're building up the tones. We can refine that later. This is all about making us better at studying things quickly, getting things down, taking the fear away from starting a painting, and getting something on the canvas that is a building block that we can then refine and add detail to. And what I like with this technique of kind of refining the paint strokes, as you'll see on the left hand side of the little box here and around the bird, like with a real painting, and you can see in Fabricius's painting, you can see where he's gone round the outside of the bird with kind of white to refine the shape, and with the box, and you see those brush strokes, and it adds interest, and you'll leave little gaps where the underpainting kind of comes through, and you'll see this more and more on proper paintings. If you were to draw things completely tight, now some projects you need to do that, and a lot of my work you need to do that, and you get a lovely crisp edge, but you lose that painterly kind of touch and delicacy around the kind of feathered brush strokes, if you will, on the side, where it's not quite right. He's corrected it, or she's corrected it, and they've built upon that. And I think doing this technique, you'll get more and more of those kind of, again, Bob Rossism, happy little accidents, where you'll get a little bit of the orange underpaint coming through, and it will add interest, detail, and a bit of movement to the painting, and a bit of life, rather than just being a hard edge almost becoming like a kind of caricature of it. We're painting, we're using expressive brushstrokes, so let's see the expressive brushstrokes and let's see the work that's been put into it a little bit. So when you step back, it looks like a realistic picture, but as you come closer, you see the work and the kind of marksmanship that's gone into the painting. And I always love when I'm in a gallery really looking closely and seeing, you can see thumbprints, you can see bits of the paintbrush hair, you can see the stroke angles and the way they shape kind of and model the shapes and the forms on the page by the angle of the brush strokes. We want to see those things. So this technique of correcting as we go and turning your brush as you work, you will see those little nice kind of elements crop up in your work rather than trying to be so tight. Right, so we're coming to the end of this stage of this painting, of blocking in, getting the kind of form and shape correct. And this is where I would kind of go back into, look for mistakes, refine, then start adding the details. And I'm pretty happy. I've used a bit of the palette knife just to kind of smush the brush around. And as you'll see here, I'm comparing a little earlier study that I did, and to see how close I was kind of with the shapes on the space of the page, and as you can see, it's not far off. I'm actually happier with the box on the first one, but the bird on the second one. I think the box is a better shape on the first one. I've gone a bit long on the box on our one that we've just gone through. It's a bit too long through the kind of trunk of it, and the bottom of it, finishes a little bit low. But I'm happier with the bird on the second one, but the box on the first one. So this is where you'd kind of, again, you've finished blocking in and you'd look for little discrepancies, things that you can work on, and you might want to then start a new layer on top if you're working digitally. If you're not, you can put the paint directly over the top of it and start kind of knocking back areas or widening things or whatever it might be. But as you can see, the box is slightly tilted to the left. That's an easy tweak with just a couple of brush strokes. As we said before, the bottom is a little bit too low. You can see I'm just starting to kind of touch up and refine a little bit of the head, and this is what you'd start to go and do. You'd look at where the issues were and go in and tidy up after. But you've got something down on the canvas quickly. You've honed your skills of observing and copying something quite closely, and this will get better and better. Now, this was quite a quick thing. It didn't take me too long to do in the slightest. If you were to take a little bit more time over things, you'd probably get it tighter again. So just to recap, what we were looking at is where things sit on the canvas. The bottom, the middle points, the top points, how far the bird is from the side, and can we gauge those distances, and can we get the shape right? And don't treat it as if you're painting a bird. You are painting merely a shape on the screen. And as you can see, it's not too bad. I'm quite happy with that. It would be more than enough to kind of build upon, and I might use this as my building block for when we do the proper master's study, which I'll hopefully do soon. So again, just to recap, we're looking at the distance from the sides, from the top, and trying to work out where our image lies on the canvas, on the space of the canvas. And in a minute, after we've done this tip, we'll have a little look and see how close I got in my rushing to get this video done. Did I get it close, or was I miles off? We'll see. Right, so I promised at the beginning there would be a little tip at the end to help you draw and use free brush strokes and find the space better on the canvas and get distances from the side better, and that's to use the grid technique. which is often used for sizing up paintings, or for copying very, very kind of neat and exact. So on Artrage here, you can set you go to your grid at the top, and you set how many squares you want. So I would suggest something kind of initially like medium size like this. You don't want them too tight, because then there's a lot of work, and you don't want them too massive, because then you're doing a lot of freehand within those squares. So have a play and have a feel. The nice thing on Artrage is it puts the grid on the reference image as well as on your canvas for you, so you don't have to do any kind of weird overlays. You can center the grid onto the center of the canvas, and vertically and horizontally, and just kind of have a little look. And what you'll find is, as you're using the grid, you have a starting point, and you try and copy what is in each individual little square, if you will. And so it means the workload isn't massive. You're not looking at the whole canvas, you're only looking at a tiny bit that you have to copy. And when you put it all together, it becomes correct. So as you can see here, I'm just following the line of where it intersects with the squares. And if you can get that bit right within that little section, and then the next section, it will get right. Now, it's a really good process for, like I said before, if you're sizing something up bigger, you make a grid on a small one, and then you make a relative sized grid, bigger one on your canvas, and you copy it up, and you size it up from there. But it's also a really good one for learning to kind of find your way around the canvas and looking at distances and space, and how far away relative things are, and how far away lines are from sides and things like this. So as you use this technique, and you'll see I've just changed the color of the grid there so I can see it a little bit better. As you use this, you'll get more confident in starting points of where to put pencil to paper or brush. You could do this with a brush first rather than the pencil. And what I would recommend is, as you go, you'll get more confidence. Like I said, you'll start following the line better without really having to use the grid guides, and you'll start doing it without even thinking. And what you can do is make the squares bigger on your grid reference, so you're having to freehand wider spaces and longer spaces with more confident brush strokes, and then eventually maybe move on to doing it with a brush, so you get that nice painterly effect. But eventually what you can then do is, you won't need the grid. You'll start to see objects where they lie on the canvas, and where your hand and pencil or stylus or brush needs to be to correlate to that. It will start becoming second nature. So it's worth a little practice. I'll speed up the process now so you can see how we're getting on with it, but it's worth the practice, and you will gain confidence doing that. It's a little bit like tracing but not tracing. You're drawing, but you know it's going to be accurate. So it's a good one to kind of have a little play with and see if it works for you in your workflow. So as we're approaching the end of this little kind of grid system thing, you'll have seen through that I was making lots of little mistakes as I went. Again, just on a much smaller scale. So the same principle applies whether you're doing it big or not. So let's see how it compares to our original sketch. We weren't that far away from the grid system. You can see with that initial doodle, we weren't that far away. Our eye was quite honed in. We didn't do too bad. How was the painting? Oh, it's not bad at all. The bird is in the right place roughly, the shoulder's a little bit off. It's that bottom point of the box that I kind of got wrong, and the bottom bar, but it's workable. It's definitely workable. And it's, with a bit more concentration and not trying to kind of just do this with the pressure of filming yourself as you're doing it for YouTube, I think I'd have got that probably a little bit closer again. It wasn't too bad, and that's where it's quite a good way. So if you do a grid system first of a quick sketch, that's going to be bang on, and rather than just overlaying the image so it becomes like a tracing thing, you're not really learning anything through tracing, whereas you would learn quite a lot through doing the grid system and seeing how close you got. So yeah, you can see I wasn't too far off. It was just that bottom point really, which was kind of frustrating really. Looking back, kind of got that wrong. I think I followed my initial line with the darker line and didn't really treat it as I treated it as the bottom of the box rather than the start of the shadow. So, what a mistake of a maker. But overall, it's pretty close. It wasn't far off at all. And then what you can do once you've kind of got your drawing from the grid one, it's not an end point, it's just a beginning point for you. If you wanted to then paint on top of it, you'll see here I've kind of knocked the opacity down, and I'm painting underneath it and using the same process as we did before, but I've just got a little bit more of a guide that I've drawn. It's not tracing, and it's a starting point for you. Now you could also do this with the grid system, paint directly on and kind of forego the pencil bit, and you'll still get the same effects. It will still be nice and painterly and loose, but very close, closer than my painting was, because you've gridded it up. So it's a really good one to practice with and have a dabble, and you'll find that it completely improves your observation skills, your strokes, your confidence in your stroke, and your positioning of where your hand is, your stylus, and getting that kind of the building blocks of the painting down first, and then using our talents and skills to kind of hone and refine that. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please do like and subscribe and do all that YouTube shenanigans. If you do, I'll try and post more. I've been a bit slack because I've been so busy, but it means an awful lot if you do give us a like and a subscribe, and let me know in the comments below if you want to see something specific that I can show you in a tutorial. Do you want to learn about my life as a digital illustrator, what it takes to get to be one, or day-to-day stuff, or do you want to learn tips and tricks on anything like that? Do let me know, and if you want to fire any kind of question, I always try and answer as many comments as I can. But thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.